put his house up for sale. We need to keep working together to get all of these issues addressed. Next slide. So those were the acute impacts. The chronic impacts, the long term. Exposure for cancer, they say 20 years latency period. But the chronic impacts can occur much sooner than 20 years. And they include damage to the liver and kidneys, the lungs, developing fetus, reproductive damage, nerves causing weakness and poor coordination, affecting the nervous system, affecting the brain, leukemia, and on and on. These are the chemicals that are in the air in Dish. These are the chemicals that are in the air in locations that have compressor stations, wells, condensate tanks, loading facilities for condensates throughout the Barnett Shale. Next, please. So as I mentioned, we did a health survey, and Calvin distributed them to the community at Dish. And when you started looking at it, odors, when Calvin talked about he woke up and there was a really bad odor, our odors occur 1 to 7 days a week, as reported by the people in Dish. Odors occur 5 to 24 days a month. And they consist of sulfur smells and natural gas smells. 90% of the people that live in Dish experience odor events. 90%. Would you like to live in a community that has odor events? 90%. I work by a lot of fence line communities, by industrial facilities and refineries. 50%, 60% odor events. Not this number that's more than 90. This is a very acute and very long-term exposure that's going on in these communities. Next, please. So when I asked the community how many times they experienced odor events and what they qualified as them, they listed them as the sulfur smell, the rotten egg smell, burning eyes, runny nose, sore throat, sinus, headaches, and asthma. If you start having these types of symptoms, you need to start writing it down, date and time, so that we can go back and look at ambient monitoring around and see if we can correlate it. The other health effects, they said, were the natural gas smell, and again, nausea, indigestion, headaches, and asthma. 71% of the community in Dish report having respiratory impacts. Would you like to live where there's respiratory impacts in 71% of your community members? Think how many patients would have to go to the doctor. Next, please. So these are the health impacts that were listed by the community of Dish. And the ones with the stars by them are the ones that exceeded the TCEQ long and short term. 61% of the health impacts were associated with the chemicals that exceeded the health impacts set by TCEQ. 61%. So if any of you saw the special last night, this is another community desperate to have a special featuring the kinds of things that are going on in this community and the health impacts. Thank you. Next slide. So we did some sampling in early March, and we used a methane monitoring unit by Macaro out of California. And then when we found some really, really high spikes, we got out and collected a canister. Oh, let me do this first. Okay. So this one is a picture of Dish compressor stations. And this was, the arrows identified leaking sources. The leaking sources were based on a camera. And you look and you see it looking like black smoke coming out of all of those locations where the arrows are. When TCEQ comes in response to a complaint, and as you remember, they're supposed to respond within 12 hours, the first thing they do is they shine that camera where you've complained about a leak or spill. And if they see something, then they have a handheld monitor. And that handheld monitor tells them a value. And they've got a number which they've changed frequently, and if the handheld unit exceeds that number, they collect a canister. And the canister is sent to the lab. Now, when they did the survey at Fort Worth, that was what you looked with the camera, you looked with the handheld, and you took the canisters. And the canisters were the ones that were analyzed by the wrong method, so that they couldn't see the levels of benzene that were exceeding the TCEQ levels. So you have to be careful when they come out in response to your complaint, that when they take that canister, they analyze it by the most sensitive, so that they can see if benzene is there. Benzene, known human cancer-causing agent. And not give you the wrong information, like there's no problem. Okay, so next. All right, so the Caro unit was looking for methane. And again, when we got a real high spike of methane, we collected a canister. In this location in Dish, we came by this location twice. First, Dish was the first place we headed for before they knew we were in town, because we were in this bus, and it's like you can't miss us in the bus. So we got the high methane readings here, and then we came back the next night and took Calvin on the ride on the bus. And then we had a meeting at which we had a lot of discussion, and then a lot of people went out to the bus. But you'll see the methane spike, and you can see the area, it spreads out. And so with these kind of monitors, you can just drive by and get a methane reading, and when it goes up, you should get a canister. The interesting thing is that the monitor that's going on in Dish does not measure for methane, but Sharon Wilson does the calculation and makes sure everybody knows how high the calculated methane is when the methane goes up. Next. I have my glasses. So we also went around Flower Mound, because that was the big Williams facility that was going to collect all the produced water and ship it off-site or put it in the injection well right on the edge of the community. And so we took a canister where we got a high hit. So here you see the results of what was detected in the canister using the right analytical method, not the wrong one, the TCEQ used. And so you have benzene, known human cancer-causing agent. It did not exceed the standard, but it was there, present. You had chloromethane, dichloro, toluene, and then you had the tentatively identified compounds. And we had a methane level of 46 parts per million. The monitor reads up to about 18 or 20. And so when it peaks, it's up at the top and it stays up. And when we collected this sample, it was 46. If you back calculated those kind of numbers to the monitor in Dish, the values would be sky high. The odors here were just horrendous when we took the canister sample. Really, really intense, like how could anybody stand to be outside? And again, it had the high methane, and it had benzene and other volatile organics. Next. So here you see the plotting that we did with the unit from Picaro. And as you see, huge, huge methane peaks. This was the last stop of the night, and so we were staying by the airport, so we started driving back to the airport, and 5 miles away, as we drove back to the airport, we kept crossing what we thought was the plume's path, and actually detecting it every time. We kept zigzagging back, and out 5 miles from the source, and the source was connected with the Williams facility in Flower Mound. 5 miles out, we were still picking up 4 parts per million.